Our grid reporter for the Houston Chronicle, and Dr. Harish Sarma Krishnamurti, Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Houston. Welcome to you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Claire, why has Texas become such a prominent location for data center development?
So Texas is already the state with the second most data centers. Virginia is number one. So it's historically already been a hub for data centers, particularly around the Dallas area. And the Dallas area became a hub because it had a lot of fiber optic cables. So a lot of the infrastructure that data centers needed to, be a part of the internet ecosystem. But nowadays, the main reason that data centers are coming to Texas in waves is because we're such an energy-rich state. So data centers, especially the data centers that power AI, need a lot of electricity, and it's getting harder and harder to find that electricity across the country. So it's still faster to connect to the Texas grid than to grids elsewhere, partly because we have our own independent grid. And then for data centers that are, finding that it takes too long for them to connect to the Texas grid, maybe longer than they'd like, they can also stand up their own power generators, whether with natural gas or, some are trying to look into solar and battery solutions. And so Texas is just adding power generation to our grid too at a rapid clip. And so data centers come here because they think it can accommodate their demand.
Dr. Krishnamurti, how much demand are we talking about here?
Oh, that's so recently ERCOT came up with the forecast that by 2032 there will be 367 gigawatts. So of course, it may not reach that levels, but then we are still looking at close to 150 gigawatts of peak demand by 2030 or 2032. So that's a lot, because right now the highest has been about 85.6 gigawatt that was in summer 2023. So you can imagine this like a significant growth. So there's an expectation that the power demand will grow by about 2 to 2.1%, but that's way higher than what we have seen in the last couple of decades. So which means that the entire infrastructure, in order to accommodate for all the data centers, will have to grow significantly over the next several years to make sure that everybody gets the desired power that they need at a certain time.
Yeah, Claire, ERCOT's anticipation, their suggestion of this, I guess, fourfold increase in demand in the next 6 years. They initially sort of put that out as, well, we think this is what may happen, or this could happen, and then there was immediately pushback to it. And now, as I understand it, they're saying, well, we might revise that number. Do we have certainty about how much electricity demand the grid is going to require?
It's really difficult right now to get that kind of certainty on really how much power will data centers coming to Texas need. Nobody really knows. And that's because these ERCOT's forecast is based on information they're getting from transmission distribution utilities. So like CenterPoint, for example, here in the Houston area. And what's happening is a lot of data center developers, they might be submitting multiple applications in Texas, maybe, at different locations, or even, across the country, just trying to see like which ones move forward fastest, which ones might get a grid connection fastest, or maybe they, want to build a data center, but for whatever reason, their plans won't pan out. And so you have a lot of speculative projects in ERCOT's waitlist right now. And so it's just making it difficult for ERCOT to determine what is a realistic project that will actually be built. There's a gray area, of course, and trying to make any of these like criteria. There's pushback from industry who say we are a real project, but, even if we might not meet one or two of these criteria. And so that's why they put out that forecast that power demand might more than quadruple. I think there's broad industry consensus that that's impossible. It's just there's not enough data center infrastructure in the US to build that many data centers, let alone in Texas. But the hard part is figuring out so what really is coming.
And I imagine also nobody wants to underreport, come up with a figure, a number, and then suddenly we hit 2030 or 2032 and the demand is larger than whatever that number was that was reported. Now we're in real trouble, right?
Right. I mean, so it's important to get a correct number or, somewhat accurate number, because if we underestimate demand, that means we haven't built the grid to fully accommodate demand. And so that risks electricity costs skyrocketing, because there's a mismatch of supply and demand, and also even rolling blackouts because the system can't serve all the demand. But also overbuilding the system. So, if all of these data centers that say they want to come here don't come here, and we assume they're all going to come here, and then we way overbuild the grid, that could also lead to issues. Primarily, that means a lot of infrastructure that somebody still has to pay for. So all of our electricity bills too could also see an impact there if we overbuild.
Okay, Dr. Krishnamurti, this really gets right down to the heart of it, I think, for most of us, which is even if everybody that has a piece in this is accurate in terms of what the demand will ultimately be, and even if the infrastructure is in place and the grid can handle it, what does it mean for us and for our electric bills? How much more could we be paying?
So one of the major issues is, we are already going through a grid transformation. There are multi-fold, first, let alone AI data centers for now. So one is our grid infrastructure is already aging. I think 50% of all the transmission distribution, the transformers, cables, they are beyond their operational lifetime, right? So they have to be renewed, and so that's on one side. Second, we have hurricanes and wildfires in some locations, so grid has to be modernized for that as well. And the third thing is basically you have variable renewables and others coming in, because economics kind of help with solar panels have reached even cost parity and beyond, right? Like right now. So with all these variations, now you add a variable load on data centers. So, there are different elements here. Again, it's very hard to predict. So on one side, the infrastructure that are needed to make our grid more resilient against, the conventional natural calamities and the transformation aspects, they eventually will fall on top of consumers like us, right? So we'll see that increase. We are already seeing those increases. So we probably, it's very hard to put a number, but it'll probably go maybe almost twice before it comes down. I'm again, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
That said, now coming to the AI data center. So the Senate Bill 6, and that's they propose that if a data center requires a certain amount of infrastructure, let them invest for that, right? So first, the Texas state and ERCOT, they are looking at a facility where they can make the data centers pay for that money for all the infrastructure that they need. On the other hand, there are also these calls for bringing your own grid or bring your own power, BYOG, it's something which is becoming popular, where if you're installing a data center, you rather bring the necessary power by having natural gas generators or energy storage, whatever behind it. So that way, again, it is relatively less likely that we will face the data centers cost a lot on consumers' heads. But that said, there will always be some element which kind of indirectly will come to us.
Claire Howe is an energy and power grid reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Dr. Harish Sarma Krishnamurti is an associate professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Houston. Thank you both very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Grand rising. The time is about 9:29 a.m. Southern Texas. As the coastal zone 9A, 9B, I'm about 35, 40 miles northwest of the big city of Houston in the burbs. And doing my morning errands. Went and got my hot mocha from my favorite coffee shop, Minute Coffee, off Highway 6 in Northwest Houston. Great coffee, great prices. Well, great mocha too. As usual, I'm getting a full charge of my Tesla. And I'm listening to talk radio as usual. I love listening to talk radio to find out what's going on in the country and the world on all topics, all things. And as what I'm doing is, they're talking about the data centers and lots of power that they use again. Texas is recruiting lots of data centers because data centers want to be in Texas because Texas has the most energy of all states in the whole country. And also Texas has very lenient building codes that allows them to build. So Texas has plenty of energy and lenient building codes that allow them to build. And Texas has a lot more room because Texas is also the second biggest state in the whole country. So that's what you just got through listening to. I also was listening to a conversation about the U.S. and Iran war. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. It's still closed. Barrel of oil is right under $100, which is very expensive. But the energy companies here in Texas are loving it because they've increased their profits by double. The large oil producing companies here in Texas are making a killing from this war. A killing. They're loving this war. They're making billions of more dollars in profits this quarter, which is crazy. You folks who drive ICE vehicles, which is gas vehicles, you guys are taking the big hit because you guys are paying $4 and I think 15 cents here in Texas for a gallon. That's crazy. That is crazy here in Texas. You're paying $4.15 per gallon here in Texas. That's crazy. So, as this war with the U.S. and Iran continues on, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. The merchant shipping cargo fleet is very affected by this. So it goes on. It goes on, people. So I'm going to head back home now. And I'm doing some things in my aquaponics system. I'm very happy. As you already know, I've gotten my 300-gallon Rubbermaid tub, 300 gallons for a large sump for my second aquaponics system, my large one. I'm getting that set up to grow even more food aquaponically. And it's a very warm day here in southern Texas, in the Houston area. Right now, it's 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So we are going to our hot season here. So I hope you guys have an awesome day. I hope you're getting outside, grounding, detoxing, manifesting, invigorating yourself, drinking some tea, finding your chi. And remember, my goal is to be more self-sustainable in all ways of my life. That's my goal. So you guys have a nice Tuesday. And remember, we got to save ourselves. Ain't nobody coming to save us.